There's just too many books in this room. Let's just move the camera.
Ow!
Oh, sorry.
Just jumping over the book.
Hi and welcome back to my channel. I'm Simon and today I am joined by the artist formerly known as my mother, Louise Savage Muses.
Stop it.
I won't. As we are going to be ranking the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist from 6 to number 1. And this is quite exciting because we haven't talked about these books, and also we did it very differently this year because usually we read the fiction long list together.
Yeah.
However, there's absolute minxes over at the Women's Prize introduced a new prize this year, and so Mum has been off having adventures in the land of non-fiction.
I have, and it was absolutely wonderful.
And you can see on her channel tomorrow our ranking and favourites and I guess winner predictions of that, although we didn't actually predict what we thought the judges might pick.
I did.
Or did you?
Yeah.
I didn't. Anyway. Oh no, you did actually.
Yeah.
Whereas I just thought my winner should be everyone's winner.
Yeah, you did.
There we go. We're going to reveal what we think the other one will pick as their winner. So I am going to do that first. So Mum, if you could turn away, properly turn away. And that is the book that I think Mum will pick as her winner. And now Mum,
like somebody fallen down the stairs.
Now Mum is going to do the same.
I am. Turn away, Simon.
I'm turned.
Oh, I think Simon will choose this one.
Right. I feel like, have we missed anything out?
No.
That seemed a very swift start.
Oh, that's not like us, but let's embrace it.
Yes. Right, now, I was allowed to pick first last time, so as you're my guest, you can pick.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So book number 6?
Yeah.
Okay. So my book number 6 was Kate Grenville's Restless Dolly Maunder, which was a bit of a surprise because I've read other books by Kate Grenville and absolutely been blown away by them. But although I enjoyed reading this, I can't lie. I thought it's a fictionalised account of her grandmother's life, isn't it? Is it a grandmother or a great grandmother?
It's grandmother.
Grandmother. And she did have an extraordinary life, and it was a story worth telling. But I felt it was similar to other stories I'd read before, and also it's set in Australia. And it's written in quite a sort of breathless way. And I wasn't
What
hearing...
do you mean by breathless?
Oh, I don't know. It was just...
I'm intrigued.
Yeah, just kind of just this fast, this pacey voice. I thought the voice was... There was... I wouldn't say... It wasn't rushing or anything like that, but it was just quite snappy. And maybe that's what her grandmother was like, and she was trying to characterise that. But the problem I had with it was that I wasn't hearing an Australian. I really wanted to hear an Australian. I wanted an Australian voice in my head when I was reading it. And I thought that was a real shame. I kind of felt a little bit cheated. And maybe that's my own fault because that's what I was anticipating. I felt this would have made... I don't quite understand why she fictionalised it. So yeah, I was... It's a nice... That sounds really... Yeah, I'm glad I read it. But it didn't...
It's not a bad book.
No, it's not. But it just didn't... I think I'm surprised that it was shortlisted because there wasn't anything particularly zingy and new about it.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, my number 6 is also Kate Grenville's Restless Dolly Maunder. And I say it slightly with a heavy heart because I love Kate Grenville's writing. I have read previous novels of her and have just been completely and utterly spellbound by them. I felt that this, I don't know whether it was because she was fictionalising her grandmother, but I felt it was always a bit not face value, what do I mean? I didn't get the depth that I wanted. I think because Dolly Maund is a very complicated character.
Yeah.
And she was also very, like, in terms of the world around her, she was very ahead of her time.
Yeah, she was. Really admirable.
The childhood that she had, she was, like, told, you're not going to go and do education, you're not going to be... And yet she became a businesswoman. She was incredible.
Made a lot of money.
It was fascinating for me because I felt like I was reading narrative non-fiction.
Right.
More than I felt I was reading fiction. And I have read the non-fiction book about her mother's life, which is brilliant. It's called One Life. I can't recommend it enough to everyone. And that had more life in it than I felt this one did. There was almost like I felt like it was the shadow of Dolly, not the full vibrancy of it. And also, whilst I think I did feel it was Australian, I felt like it kind of glossed over Australian history, because if it wasn't relevant to Dolly, it wasn't really relevant apart from when they had business problems because of, and also what happened with the war. That was heartbreaking.
Yeah,
but
that was heartbreaking.
And actually that was the bit that I found the most emotional, was the very end of the book. And then actually when Kate writes about her grandmother in a non-fiction way at the end.
I've forgotten that, actually.
So yeah, but I will say I'm really pleased that she's been listed, because I'm hoping that people go and read her other books, like An Idea of Perfection.
Oh, it's a wonderful
which
book.
won the Women's Prize when it was the Orange Prize, is stunning. The Secret River, stunning.
Yeah.
So yeah, End Papers, stunning. But yeah, I just I love Kate Granville. I've had the pleasure of interviewing her online before, and she's a treat. And I just felt like she's normally a 10 out of 10, and this for me was like a 7 out of 10. But because that's Kate, it feels a bit like, I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
About it.
Yeah.
What's your number 5, Louise?
Okay, so I keep changing my mind, but I think my number 5 is River East, River West by Aubrey Lescure. And the only reason that I've put it at 5, I think, is because I didn't get hooked on it straight away. It took me quite a long time to get into the book, and I am so glad I read it, because there were aspects of this novel that I absolutely adored. And I think the structure of this and the way that the stories are interwoven, I'll say a little bit about what it's about in a minute, is really clever and very sophisticated. So it's set in Shanghai in China, isn't it?
Yeah.
In 2007 or something like that. I think it starts. So there's 2 timelines. It's there's a contemporary story, and then we go back. So the main character is called Alva.
Yes.
And so we learn about Alva and her mother Sloane, who is.
I smile as you say something, because she is quite the character.
She is quite the character, and she went to live in China in the 80s. And stayed there. So she's a US citizen, which becomes very important in the novel, actually, that's her background. And she comes to live in China when there were very, very, very few white people. So she kind of really stands out, and she's a faded movie star, and she's got loads of bottle. So she's peroxide hair, and so
literally loads of bottle.
Yeah, literally loads of bottle, because she does have an issue with drink as well.
Oh yeah.
And Alva has no idea who her father is. And I thought the way that was written about was really poignant. And Alva's life sort of goes on this spiral, sort of car crashing spiral. So there's a lot in here about contemporary childhood or adolescence in China. But much more than that, I enjoyed the story of Lu Fang. So Lu Fang is a character, and again, I don't want to give too much away, but he's a middle-aged Chinese businessman, and he's made lots of money, and the novel opens with him marrying Alva's mother.
Well, the first line of the book is what I love.
Oh yeah.
My mother was stolen in ballroom by Lu Fang.
That's right. So, you're seeing their relationship initially through Alva's eyes, and the narration goes between Alva and Lu Fang, doesn't it? So I had a few issues with it to start with. It took me a while to get into, but I really, really enjoyed this book. And again, by the end, I was like, ugh. And it doesn't. The other thing that's brilliant about it is you realise it's called River East, River West, which are the two different sides of Shanghai that are bisected by a river. But it's also so much about Western and Eastern culture.
It is.
I think it deals with. It's a really intelligent novel, because it deals with colonialism, and it deals with the American idea of China and the Chinese idea of America. It deals with that fantastically well.
Oh, well, this is a little bit spooky, because my number 5 is River East, River West. And I loved everything about that you said you did. I was into it quite quickly, actually, and I had a wobble in the middle. And the reason I had a wobble in the middle was because I was much more invested. I liked both narratives, and I liked both timelines, because they were saying so much about, well, I love books all about where cultures come together, where they clash, where they sort of repel each other, all that kind of stuff. And this is very much one of those books, and I love it for that. This is also, I will say, a book that I think I put this on my personal shortlist, but I have thought about ever since I've read it.
Yes.
I keep thinking about it, and I cannot wait to see what she writes next.
No.
But my issue was I had this bit in the middle where I was not sure. I felt there was a couple of tropes in the Alva storyline that I'd read before and I could see coming. There's one particularly around an older man that I was just like, I did that when that storyline happened. It's like, you don't need to do this. Your writing is brilliant. You don't need that twist.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
But I was much more invested in Lu Fang's story as it went on. And so every time I switched to Alva, I was a bit like, this is a bit melodramatic teenage drama. Whereas what I was really interested was like the historical drama. And I felt like when we were in Lu Fang's sort of Shanghai and its history came to the fore all the more.
Yes.
And there were some points within history without any spoilers. One nearly made me cry.
Yes.
And there was another where I was so shocked by what had happened to one character that I literally had to put the book down for about 5 or 10 minutes.
I also really loved, again, without giving anything away, I thought his relationship with Alva,
the way they looked at
and
step-parents,
the way that develops was brilliant, and I loved the ending. You know, I was really, I didn't see it coming actually at all, and I think it's quite unusual these days to read a book that has that kind of resolution. Well,
we've talked about that for so long now. We've no time for any of the others, I'm afraid. But as you can see, like, this is a really... Because it's the one bit I don't like about the ranking thing, is it makes it sound like, oh, I didn't like this book. I really did, and I cannot wait to see what she writes next. But I was definitely invested.
I think what we're doing is speaking to the quality of the shortlist, is what we're doing.
Right,
so
your
my number four.
I think this is where we'll start to diverge.
Yeah, I think so. My number 4 is the book that I think may well win.
Oh.
So my number 4 is Enter Ghost by Isabella Hamad. And I left this book till last, not because I didn't want to read it, but because from the first moment I heard about it, I really wanted to read it. It tells the story of a woman called Sonia who's in middle age, is she in her late 30s?
Do not say that as middle age.
Sorry.
Anyway, it's about a woman called Sonia. It's because I'm getting testy about the fact that I'm 42 and refusing to admit I'm in middle age. Anyway, moving on. The book.
Can't cope with it. Sonia decides that she wants to go and spend some time in Haifa with her sister, and she hasn't been back for 11 years. So we are, alongside Sonia, plunged into life in Haifa, but also we cross over into the West Bank, and Sonia is an actor. So she's just in between acting jobs. She's got other things lined up potentially.
Well, she's also had a bit of a...
she's had
something around.
Relationship.
Oh, I wasn't going to say that.
Well, I think that's fine.
There's a reason that she's not... okay.
Yeah, there is a relationship thing. Anyway, she gets involved in a production of Hamlet, which is why it's called Enter Ghost. So she gets roped into this production very unwillingly to start with, and then gradually. And the thing about the production is it's a whole host of people from that part of the world, from very different backgrounds and with different political perspectives. What I really loved about this book, well, there were several things. I loved the way that it made you... I've got a much better sense of what living in that part of the world might feel like, because you're looking at it from the eyes of somebody whose grandparents had a house in Haifa, who, you know, had been into the West Bank before, and something very, very memorable happened to her there, and she didn't realise at the time, I think she was 11, she didn't realise how that would resonate with her for the rest of her life. So that was really interesting, I think. The sort of, you know, how over time, it's only over time you begin to understand the triggers that you have as a child. So I really enjoyed that.
Or triggers that you have from childhood as well.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed the very brittle relationship between her and her sister. I thought that was really realistically portrayed. And I love Hamlet as a play. Now, I don't know, and it'd be interesting to talk to you about this. You know, I've studied Hamlet. I know it really, really well. I can recite big chunks of it. And that's not a boast. It's just a fact.
All right, Judy Dent.
No, it's just a fact. You know, I've taught it, for goodness sake. And one of the things I found fascinating was that she uses scenes from Hamlet within the text. So it's laid out like, the script. But it's a translation, and she's translating it back from Arabic into English.
But also, quite often, their conversations turn into scripts.
They are, but the point
really
about
cleverly done.
The point that I'm trying to make about the translation is that when it's translated back into English, it's different. It's not the original Shakespeare. And I found that really, really interesting, because it's language can tell you so much about a culture. So I think this book must have been, goodness knows how long it took her to write. I think it's a masterpiece in exploring the use of script on the page in a novel. So it's got an awful lot to commend it, but I didn't find it page turning. Not that it needed to be necessarily at all, but there were times when I was like, oh, I don't feel it's moved on particularly. So I suppose I'm saying I found it a little bit slow in places. But I did really, really enjoy it. And the ghost motif is really important all the way through as well. It's really literary and it's exploratory. And I think I think this is one of the books on this list that is genuinely really original.
Oh, well, I'm not going to talk about that book now because that's not my number 4. Because Soldier Sailor is my number 4, which is going to make me very unpopular with most of the internet because this is the favourite, I think, to win. This is by Claire Kilroy, and this is about a mother and son relationship, so that's quite interesting talking to you about it. So, the pros and the cons is how I'm going to do it. The pros, I thought the way it threw you into the mind of this woman who's going through a very difficult time emotionally, psychologically, physically after having a child, and her relationship is and this love for her child is so strong. I thought that was done really well. I got completely confused by it at the start and had to reread it. I was like, why is she in some brambles? Also, I found the first 2 pages really saccharine. I was like, I get it, you love him. I get it, you love him. But it was like, it was a lot. I really liked this. I wanted it to either be bigger because I felt like I wanted to get more of the surroundings, but it's meant to be very interior and intense, I get that. Or I want it to be even shorter. And that's the only way that I can really describe that. Does that sound weird?
No.
But I didn't feel 100% engaged with it all the time. And I did find the whole stream of consciousness is not something that I love anyway, but it can be done really well. And I do think she does it really well, but that's just not a personal me thing. But I do think it's brilliantly written, but I think sometimes I was just like, okay, I get it. I felt like it was quite repetitive-ish maybe, which is a little bit harsh. There we are.
Which is interesting because my number 3
no!
Soldier Sailor.
Wow, okay.
And when I read, this was the first one I read off the shortlist. And I thought, when I read this, I thought, this is going to win. This is the one I want to win. I hadn't read any of the others, which was my mistake. Because I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think this is. Is it a debut?
No, I don't think so.
But I this book put me in touch with feelings that I knew I had, and had either forgotten about or not really articulated to myself.
I think it's her 5th.
Oh wow!
So there's lots to go back to if you enjoyed it.
Yeah,
which I did.
It writes about the way that motherhood just completely manipulates your feelings and your psyche. I've never seen anywhere, I don't think, anybody write about the resentment you feel towards your partner.
I thought you were going to say child.
And that as well.
I was about, I'm off.
You know, the resentment that you can feel towards your partner. There are times when you want to flipping kill them when you've got a young child. They're snoring away or sleeping away.
All right,
and you've been up for... No, seriously, it does.
We've opened something.
Yeah, it did. It really, really opened something. And the way that, you know, your child is the thing that you love the most, and your whole instinct is to protect them. But there are times when you could actually, if you're really honest with yourself, hurl them across the room, because it's flipping
extreme.
hard work. It's really, really extreme. And what I loved about this book was that, that whole confusion thing at the beginning, I was confused as well. But that's because that's how she was feeling. She didn't know what she was doing either. And I thought she wrote about that really well. Like she like, who am I? Why am I doing this? What's going on?
The only thing for me is if that had come a little bit later,
maybe,
I would have got it. But I think it was you're so thrown in, which is in one way a huge accolade to the book, because you are, and I think if people had been guessing, they might have thought I would have put that book a lot lower, because I didn't really talk about it that much on the channel. But it's because that has stayed with me.
I think every mother will have felt things like this, not necessarily to the same degree, but you will have felt this. And what was also utterly brilliant was it made me laugh a lot as well.
It is funny.
I rarely laugh out loud at a book, but I was irritating Tim because he's like, what are you laughing at?
That's my stepdad.
Yeah,
the man that Mum was saying she might have wanted to kill at some point.
This is worthy of winning.
Yeah.
you know,
It's the
definitely.
favourite, I think.
But I
So I'm intrigued.
didn't choose it as my first.
That's fascinating. That's the bit that I don't know. Yeah, I want to talk about later. Anyway, so my number 3 is Enter Ghost by Isabella Hamad. I thought this was a really, really brilliant book. I think it's a very literary book. I think it's quite experimental, which I really, really enjoyed. I thought it's interesting. For me, one of its greatest strengths is one of its weaknesses as a reader for me, because when she was turning conversations that the characters were having into a script, sometimes it really worked for me. Other times I was like, hang on a minute, what's going on? I've got a bit confused. Or, I get it, you've done it. Which, so that was a bit of an odd one. There are certain parts of this book, because I've been to Israel, and when you first arrive, and the way she describes like the security, and then you get out there and there's this heat and this sense of smell, and you want to it's a bit grimy and you want to go and see the beauty in it, that I thought it instantly took me back to that. I think the way that she writes about the history of the situation between Israel and Palestine I think she does a very deft thing with that, because she is telling you it from all sorts of different characters' perspectives. So this is not a moral book in terms of her trying to force something.
There's nothing. She's not judging, is she? Really?
No, and she's not pushing a specific agenda. I didn't feel she's highlighting the issues there, and I found that incredibly educational. All about. I didn't realise there had been 3 of the intifadas.
Yeah, intifadas.
That I didn't know about, and I think as well that was really interesting to me, because having been there, that's never talked about. So she looks into the fact that how the Western world is only getting really one side of things generally. I think this is a really powerful book. I think it's an incredibly political book, again, but without being... It for me, it's not a moral compass book.
No, and it's not hectoring or...
No.
Or...
I do think there were times when I was a bit like, oh, I need to have a bit of a breather from it. But I think that's partly intentional. I love the way she looked at all different walks of life, these different characters. I like that there's this sort of grey area with relationships in between, which I thought was really, really well done. And I loved that. There's lots of sexual tensions in all sorts of ways with this book as well. I'm really keen to go back to her debut, The Parisian, which is a big chunkster.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
I definitely want to read more of her work, and I think if this one won, I'd totally get it, I'd be happy. But I think some people are saying it might win because of what's going on in the world. That's a disservice to this book.
Yes,
because it's a very, very, very well written book, full stop. Although I will also be very honest and say, because of what's going on in the world, it's one of the reasons that I most wanted to read it, because I wanted to get more insight and, you know, sort of see what the history has been and how awful it's been and how we haven't been told about it. But again, how she tells us that without it ever feeling, I just think, very, 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 very well crafted book. Mum, well, this is interesting now. See, I had this the other way when we did the shortlist video,
I'm
which
really
was on Mum's channel.
Actually.
We are,
I don't
they're
know
the same
why.
top 2.
Yeah.
Well, I'm particularly shocked by one of them for myself.
Oh, me too, as well.
So what's your number 2?
So my number 2 is The Wren. And the reason Simon's saying that we're shocked, I think, is because the actress by Anne Enright, and that is the only other book by her that I've read, but I think you've read others, was it shortlisted or longlisted several years ago, wasn't it, for the Women's Prize? So I read it for that reason, and I really didn't enjoy it. It was just... the characters weren't... It just wasn't...
It had
something
one
that I was
amazing
very
scene in that book.
interested
The
in.
bomb scene is phenomenal.
Yeah, yes,
but
that's
the rest
right.
of it was like,
Yeah, no, it just left me... Sorry, Anne. But it just didn't do it for me. So I approached this with a little bit of caution. I just think this book is exquisitely written. I think the prose in here is some of the most beautiful prose I've ever read. So Carmel is the grand... No, hang on.
So it's Nell and her mum Carmel.
Right. So Nell's granddad
It was a
poet
famous poet. So
in
Carmel's
Ireland.
dad.
Yes, Carmel's father was a poet in Ireland. And so the book, he's kind of like this figure in the background, isn't he? You know, who...
Although he does get a chapter.
He does get a chapter, actually. Yeah, you're quite right. So we see things from Nell's perspective and from Carmel's perspective, don't we? Moves between these two viewpoints. And again, that is done, and she does that wonderful thing where you're snatched away from one when it's just getting, when you really want to know more, and you're like, I don't want to move to the other one, and then you go to the other character, and you're like, so it's absolutely beautifully structured. This poet grandfather or father, depending on which character you're talking about, has got this sort of big reputation in Ireland, but it's a reputation that to Nell seems very old-fashioned. He's an old-fashioned poet, he's the past, and you learn an awful lot about him, and also the shadow that he casts over the family. Not specifically because he's a poet, just because of who he is.
His personality.
Exactly. And one of the things I absolutely adore about this book is that Anne Enright intersperses his poems within the sort of often at the in between sections or chapters, and she wrote the poems herself. I mean, how the hell do you do that? She wrote these poems, and one of them's called The Wren, which is where the title comes from.
He also calls his daughter Wren, doesn't he?
That's right.
Wren.
Yeah, absolutely.
And birds are a big theme in that book.
They are, but this is a book really about familial relationships, and I love the way that there are just some really small details in here about the way that relationships work. And there were certain lines in this book that just I sort of I put little post-its in, because sometimes she would just write a sentence and I'd be like, oh my god, that is just, when a piece of writing, a sentence can just get to the nub of something really important. There's something about blood and umbilical cords, and I don't know, like the connection that you have with your relatives or your children. I just think it's such a wise, clever, just utterly brilliant book.
So, okay, that's The Wren. So now, do we agree, do we disagree?
Oh, this is really exciting. I don't know, do we?
We agree.
Oh my god! Has this ever happened before?
Yeah, Hamlet.
Oh,
the
Hamlet.
Year of Hamlet.
Yes.
So I wasn't looking forward to reading this at all. I read... Oh, no, that's not fair. I wasn't as excited about this as some of the other books on the list, but with the long list, I wasn't that excited about quite a few books. So I'm just being 100% honest. Some of them worked really, really well. Some didn't. So I was like, okay, I'll give this one a go then. And I took it with me in pre-form, thinking I'm going to be able to get annoyed with it and crack its spine.
Yeah.
I couldn't stop reading it.
No.
I just thought it was wonderful. I think I read this in 3 sittings, maybe. Yeah. What I really loved about this, alongside everything Mum has said, is that I loved how different the two characters were, to the point where it could have been a different author writing each one.
Yes,
it felt.
yes.
Because actually with Nell, it felt very contemporary. Yeah. It felt like there was sort of this vignette-y nature to it, and sort of almost this new wave of Italian, Irish literature. A bit Sally Rooney, actually, I found in parts.
Yeah, I think
and
spot on.
I thought that was just gorgeous. And then there was this other element to it in both sides, actually, which reminded me of Ali Smith and her utter joy of playing with words.
Yeah.
And how you can use a word in so many different ways, be it in poetry, be it in prose, I love how she also plays with memory.
Yes.
And how you see two different moments from both characters in a very different way. There are also some lines, I can't remember, but there's one line, I think it's in a corner shop, and I can't remember what the line was, but I was just like, oh my god, that's so true. And there would be certain moments where I'd read a sentence and go, that is so true. And the way she writes the extraordinary and the ordinary, I think in this is amazing. And it's so just surprised me, because I didn't love the actress. I thought when she writes about the bomb, I thought that was amazing. I read one of her books, The Green Road, where she writes about the HIV epidemic in New York, is absolutely some of the best writing ever. But the rest of it I found really melodramatic, and I just wasn't really that invested. I thought this was absolutely stunning.
I love the way she writes as well about the frustration you have with your relatives.
Yeah, she writes, but I think what she does as well is, I feel like with her, there's a real generosity of spirit, even when characters hate each other briefly.
Yes.
And I think that's really true.
Yeah.
Because even if if I fall out with a family member, I still love them, but I've just fallen out with them. And it's like I think it's a really, I think it's such a beautiful
love and hate are so close, aren't they? They're so,
and I love
rub shoulders with each other.
The way she did allow him to have a voice at a part, because actually I thought it was very fair, but it does look about the emotional inheritances we get that we aren't always necessarily aware of as well, which I thought, so I just thought this was amazing, to the point where I had to buy myself the American edition of it, because I think that cover is a stunner. But I thought it was phenomenal and really made me laugh. really, yeah,
Yeah, no, I loved it as well.
Wow.
So I am really, I'm really delighted, but also really shocked that you chose this.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why.
I can tell she's not been watching my content on this channel.
Well, obviously I haven't watched anything.
I haven't really talked about this one on the channel,
Women's
actually,
Prize, because I didn't want to.
No. Whereas I avidly watched your vlogs.
Of course you did.
I did. I really liked your long list vlogs.
Thank you.
I just wanted a little bit more B-roll.
Thank you. Anyway, so Brotherless Night is set in Sri Lanka, and it is the early 80s. So I was kind of, as I was reading it actually, because it starts in 1981, that's right, I was making correlations with, because you were born in 82, weren't you? Yeah, I was making sort of correlations with, I did that all the way through this book actually, because I kept thinking about my life at that stage in my life, and comparing it to what Sashi was going through. In the 1980s in Sri Lanka, there was this horrendous civil war. It wasn't even quite that, because it was pretty one-sided in terms of power, I think. But the Tamil people in Sri Lanka were being suppressed by the Sri Lankan government. And I'd heard of the Tamil Tigers. I really, I sort of knew of them, and I knew that there'd been a lot of conflict and what have you. But Sashi is a young Tamil student. She wants to become a doctor. She's really driven. Her whole family is. And then this violence breaks out, and this tension.
But I think what's incredible is you see how it's bubbling, and then the sudden twist.
Yes.
That's what I thought was quite incredible.
And it's kind of, in some so you've got, the relationships between her and her brothers, there's one friend of her brother's in particular who's a very, very important character in this story, and is introduced at the beginning as a terrorist. That's the word that she uses.
I received a letter from a terrorist.
That's
I used
right,
to know.
yeah. And immediately you're kind of like, that's such an edgy word to use, isn't it? It's such a shocking word to use. And yet he's just a childhood friend initially. So all of that is the way that she describes her family to us, the way that, I can walk around their house, I can, in my head, I can picture her mother, her father, all of that. I can picture her journey to school. So we're introduced to this wonderful cast of characters who we get to know very, very well. And then you've got this horrendous. I mean, some of the scenes in this did actually make me cry, and Simon will tell you. I can get very emotionally engaged with something, but it's very rare for me to cry at a book, and it's very rare for me to cry in film or TV or anything like that. I don't know why, because it's.
Well, they'll say goodbye to her after you had a few days with her and she's off.
Oh yeah, I'm terrible, terrible. Don't, because I've got to do that in the morning. I thought this was. I would describe this as didactic fiction.
Oh.
Because I think it was a huge education in terms of that particular period of history in Sri Lanka. And I would really like to go to Sri Lanka. It's on my sort of wish list of places. We have said we would
go together.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel that this novel will really help me, if at some point I'm lucky enough to get there, to understand that country better. I just thought it was fiction at its best, and historical fiction at its best.
But also I think it's such a so it's my number one as well. I cried quite a lot at this book, and again I think that's probably somewhere we're similar. It takes me a lot to actually cry at a film or a book or actually that said some TV can really set me off. It depends what the subject matter is, but anyway, for me, I think this has everything I want in a really great book. There are certain books that I've read in my reading life that remain my absolute favourites because they've taken me to a part of the world I don't know and enlightened me to a history of that part of the world that I don't know, and have given me these characters that show me all sides of it, and who really, like you said, you feel like you walk. I mean, Sashi moves around quite a bit, but you feel like you know every place she goes to.
And also she's really exploring very openly and honestly how she feels about it. She's put in there are certain points in the novel where she has to make decisions, and she has to make them very quickly, about where her affiliations lie. And it's complex. You know, the decisions that are made within that family are really complex, and I love that. And she just highlights the utter pointlessness and destruction of civil conflict. You know, the whole situation is made to appear so futile and pointless and wasteful. Wasteful is the word.
But at the same time, I think she really brilliantly highlights how it happens so easily.
Yeah.
Through power, generally, and fear. And I think that's done really well. So you get, like Mum was saying, I think the complexities, and I think that is where I would say Into Ghost is brilliant as well, because it looks at that complexity around conflict. And again, I maybe slightly more felt there was a side to her writing in terms of how she felt.
Possibly.
But I would say it was, again, as what's the word? Well, the way that she looks at different things that happen to Sashi show how on any given day, depending on what's going on, you could make a decision that some could feel is atrocious, but for you is unnecessary, or you can do something that is deemed wrong, but actually turns out to be right. It depends on whose perspective it is.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No,
and I think the fact that she does all of this in this novel that's also just so gripping and haunting, and it's very... I felt that I was in deep with these characters, to the point where I sometimes would have to put it down because I found it claustrophobic. It's also incredibly cloying, but I think that shows that the novel's doing what it meant to do. So that is also my number 1.
Marvellous. Well, who would...
Look at that.
I would not... Oh, I've got it upside down.
Oh, she's so excited.
I would not have guessed that we were going to agree on this at all, and I'm really, really pleased.
Well, it is because...
So pleased.
Because, what did you pick what my winner was?
This one.
Oh, interesting, because I picked that your winner I thought was going to be that one.
Yeah, I kind of worked that out as you were talking about it.
So, yeah, that's
and
interesting.
you know, when I started reading them, it would have been until I read the others.
Well, that's funny about that would never have been on my shortlist at all or anything.
No.
Yeah, I'd be utterly thrilled if this one is. Won the Carol Shields Prize
recently.
Yes,
it has.
I have bought Love Marriage, which was longlisted by her for the Women's Prize before when it came out years ago. So I'm looking forward to heading to more of her work. And I can't recommend this enough. So there we go.
Yes. Oh, all that excitement.
Well, no, we've got the actual finale.
We have got the actual thing, but actually maybe this is more important.
No, it's not more important, but it is
for us
as
personally,
exciting. So there we are. That's our thoughts. Love to know what you think would make... Well, I can't speak. Love to know what you think will make the top spot. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? I'd love to hear people's thoughts. So there we are.
There will be a video coming, won't there?
Oh, yes.
Tomorrow?
Yeah, as this goes live.
What video will it be, Simon?
Oh, go on, Louise.
It'll be our discussion of the shortlist and rankings for the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction.
It will. Ooh. And also tomorrow, as this goes live, I will be at Women's Prize Live with Mum. I'm hosting one of the events, which I'm very, very excited about, and then we will be at the finale. So some of that might appear in a vlog, because I am planning on trying to get back to vlogging at some point. That's it. Don't know what we're going to do next year, because it's the 30th anniversary of the fiction, and it'll be the second year of the non-fiction. So who can say?
Thinking caps on, Mr. Savage.
Any suggestions in the comments down below of what you'd like to see? And that's it. I could waffle on for hours, as is my wont. So in honour of Louise, well, the artist formerly known as my mother, Louise Savage Muses, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me and him.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, I did it different again. Bye.
It's me, I'm using the wrong arm.
Anyway, thanks, bye.
Bye.